K.K. Downing, a name emblematic of fierce dual guitar riffs, the legendary Flying V, and decades of commitment to Judas Priest. However, after almost 40 years of influencing heavy metal history, he departed in an unsettling silence. No ado, no elaborate departure, merely unresolved inquiries. As a foundational member of Judas Priest, Downing, together with Glenn Tipton and Rob Halford, elevated the band from obscurity to a metal powerhouse. Tracks such as Breaking the Law, Living After Midnight, and Painkiller all exhibit his own influence. However, underlying the splendor, internal discord persists. As he continued to strengthen, Downing eventually recognized that he no longer belonged in the band he had helped establish. What prompted a legend such as KK? Did Downing depart from Judas Priest while the band was still at its zenith? Was it genuinely his decision or an unavoidable result of years of internal conflict? Moreover, has he ever received appropriate acknowledgement for his significant contributions to Judas Priest? KK Downing's life is not merely the narrative of an extraordinary guitarist. It is the odyssey of a solitary artist perpetually striving for his appropriate position in the ensemble he co-founded. Join us as we explore his journey from a defiant youth in West Bromwich to a heavy metal icon, ultimately becoming a man marginalized by his own band. Early life. Kenneth Keith Downing Jr., commonly referred to as KK. Downing was born on October 27, 1951, in West Bromwich, England. Raised in a working-class family, Downing did not enjoy the perfect upbringing that many others may have had. His parents, both laborers, exerted considerable effort to sustain their family in the challenging post-war British economy. His father was a stringent, conventional individual who showed no tolerance for insubordination or any deviation from the established norm. Kenny's mother lacked a significant affinity for music, thereby providing no encouragement for him to pursue artistic ambitions. From a young age, Downing exhibited a defiant disposition and profound discontent with his environment. He abhorred the inflexible framework of his household and harbored an even deeper contempt for the severe British educational system of the era. At the age of 15, he took a daring yet precarious decision. He withdrew from school. Devoid of qualifications and a definitive trajectory, Downing was compelled to traverse a realm that offered scant opportunities for individuals who deviated from traditional pathways. Shortly after graduating, he immersed himself in a tumultuous lifestyle characterized by drink, weed, and incessant revelry. Similar to numerous young individuals engaged in the rock and roll culture of that period, he undertook different menial tasks to sustain himself, although none captivated his attention. His anger with mundane existence intensified, and he perceived only one escape: music. Had Downing only been a rebellious adolescent, he could have become yet another lost individual amidst the desolate industrial terrains of England. Music served as his salvation. Upon first encountering performers such as Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, and Cream, he was utterly enthralled by the visceral intensity and unrestrained dynamism of the electric guitar. By the late 1960s, Downing encountered Ian Hill, a young bassist who also originated from West Bromwich. The two rapidly formed a connection through their mutual enthusiasm for music. Hill evolved into more than a mere companion. He guided Downing towards a substantial musical career. They initiated discussions regarding the formation of a band, and shortly thereafter, the basis of Judas Priest began to materialize. At this juncture, Downing remained an inexperienced guitarist lacking a robust technical foundation, yet, his distinguishing traits were his insatiable ambition and unwavering resolve. He practiced relentlessly, honing his talents and uncovering his distinctive style, an aggressive, high-energy approach that would subsequently characterize Judas Priest's hallmark sound. Despite originating from modest circumstances and experiencing a tumultuous adolescence, KK Downing used his frustrations and defiant nature into the impetus that would alter his life. The hardships, the scant sustenance, the restless hours dedicated to practice, these were all pivotal milestones on his journey to becoming a heavy metal icon. At that moment, Downing was unaware that the expedition he and Ian Hill were doing would not only transform their lives but also disrupt the fundamental principles of rock music. Initial professional trajectory. The initial period of Judas Priest was characterized not by triumph or spectacular performances, but rather by an unyielding fight for existence. KK Downing and Ian Hill established the band driven only by passion and a concept that few were willing to chase. During that period, blues rock predominated the music scene, and heavy metal had not yet emerged as a separate genre. However, Downing was convinced that Judas Priest could produce something distinct, more potent and incisive than anything before available. Initially, Judas Priest performed in many venues, ranging from neighborhood taverns to modest auditoriums. They lacked a record contract, experienced management, and enough equipment. Performing on confined stages with inadequate sound systems and minimal audiences became customary. Rather than feeling disheartened, Downing perceived it as an opportunity for challenge. An endurance trial and a chance to refine his abilities while defining the band's identity. Despite his and Ian Hill's efforts to sustain Judas Priest, Downing remained discontented with their prevailing condition. He desired the band to be more powerful, intense, and completely unique compared to others performing concurrently, yet, the primary concern was that Judas Priest did not possess a steady roster. The band transitioned through various lead vocalists, complicating Downing's ability to distinctly articulate the band's sound as he had envisioned. In 1973, the dynamics transformed with the accession of Rob Halford. His resplendent, formidable vocals unveiled a completely new potential for Judas Priest. Unencumbered by the constraints of prior vocalists, Downing was able to elevate the band's sound to a new echelon. Quicker, more substantial, more acute. Despite Halford's presence, one essential element remained absent: an additional guitarist capable of enhancing Downing's performance. The absence was promptly addressed with Glenn Tipton's inclusion, so solidifying the formation of Judas Priest as it would ultimately be recognized globally. The trinity of Downing, Tipton, and Halford constituted the foundation of Judas Priest, the catalyst that would elevate them from obscurity to heavy metal icons. Tipton's entrance enabled Downing to actualize his vision of dual guitar harmonies, where both guitars not only supplied rhythm but collaborated to produce intricate riffs and soaring solos. This was unprecedented in conventional blues rock and became a distinctive element of Judas Priest, solidifying their status as pioneers of heavy metal. Despite possessing a formidable roster, Judas Priest confronted a stark reality. They required a record contract to achieve significant success. Following years of hardship, they ultimately secured a contract with Gull Records, and in 1974, their inaugural album, Rockarolla, was launched. For Downing, it represented a significant achievement, yet also a source of disillusionment. The CD failed to encapsulate the sound he had envisioned. It remained excessively inspired by blues, too subdued in comparison to the music igniting in his imagination. Rather than retreating, Downing utilized it as impetus to advance Judas Priest. He and Tipton commenced experimenting with a denser, more forceful sound, incisive riffs, and accelerated tempos, all in anticipation of their significant breakthrough. The pivotal moment occurred in 1976 with the release of Sad Wings of Destiny, the record that transformed everything. With compositions such as Victim of Changes and The Ripper, Judas Priest unequivocally embraced the domain of pure heavy metal, discarding the final vestiges of their blues rock influences. The band had ceased its quest for a distinctive sound. This band was poised for dominance. Central to this transition was K.K. Downing, the catalyst for transforming Judas Priest from an obscure band into a formidable force that would reverberate throughout the rock world. They had transcended the status of merely another band performing in modest taverns. They possessed a record contract, a distinctive sound, and, most crucially, a firm vision for the future. This was merely the commencement. Heavy metal was a nascent genre, and its potential remained uncertain. However, Downing was not required to be informed. He was aware that Judas Priest was fated to achieve legendary status, and he would use every effort to realize that ambition. Judas Priest's pinnacle years. Upon the release of Sad Wings of Destiny in 1976, Judas Priest definitively emerged from the realm of typical blues rock bands and established their prominence in the heavy metal genre. K.K. Downing, with his incisive riffs and authoritative playing style, transformed Judas Priest's sound into an instrument of devastation. However, attaining the pinnacle necessitated more than mere brute strength. The band needed a distinct identity, a hallmark look, and, most importantly, tunes capable of defining an entire genre. In 1977, Judas Priest entered into a contract with Columbia Records, signifying the commencement of a wholly new epoch. Once an underground band grappling with constrained resources and subpar recordings, they now possessed the opportunity to broaden their audience. However, this brought the obligation to produce innovative content that would distinguish Judas Priest from all other bands globally. At this juncture, Downing had completely refined his playing approach and, alongside Glenn Tipton, immersed himself in songwriting, exploring bolder and more aggressive concepts. The limitations of the past were dissipated. Blues rock was entirely forsaken in favor of more incisive, rapid, and potent songs. Within a mere 3 years, Judas Priest produced a series of groundbreaking albums, including Stained Class in 1978 and Hellbent for Leather in 1979. This was the era during which they not only refined their sound but also developed an iconic image. Judas Priest debuted adorned in black leather, studs, and a distinctly provocative style. If heavy metal had previously kept aspects of hard rock, it was they who changed it into something wholly unique. K.K. Downing, characterized by his lengthy hair, iconic flying V guitar, and dynamic stage presence, emerged as one of the inaugural heavy metal guitar legends. However, all their accomplishments prior to 1980 diminished in significance when compared to British Steel, an album esteemed as one of the most significant milestones in metal history. At this point, Downing and Tipton, possessing more than 10 years of experience, had refined their songwriting skills. Tracks such as Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight achieved an ideal equilibrium between unrefined intensity and commercial allure. These tracks transcended the metal genre, appealing to a wider audience, attracting individuals who have previously not engaged with Judas Priest. Heavy metal, for the first time, transcended the underground scene and integrated into public culture. Following British Steel, Judas Priest entered the 1980s as a preeminent metal band globally. This era was characterized by extensive tours, filled venues, and consecutive record releases without indications of deceleration. Downing and Tipton persistently honed their dual guitar approach, rendering it increasingly fluid and energetic with each successive album. Screaming for Vengeance, released in 1982, not only solidified their supremacy but also catalyzed their commercial success. The song You've Got Another Thing Comin' became as a defining metal anthem of the decade, amplifying Judas Priest's appeal in America and establishing them as one of the best-selling rock acts of the era. However, for Downing, success never signified complacency. He consistently sought methods to elevate Judas Priest to unprecedented levels. While British Steel was a pivotal moment in commercial heavy metal, Defenders of the Faith, released in 1984, reintroduced the genre's weight and intensity. This era, alongside Turbo, 1986, and Ram It Down, 1988, signified Judas Priest's readiness to innovate. Although Turbo incited debate due to its synth-driven glam metal inspirations, Ram It Down unequivocally asserted that they had not abandoned their metal origins. Nonetheless, all their prior efforts appeared to be mere groundwork for Painkiller, 1990, an album acknowledged as one of heavy metal's quintessential masterpieces. This was the moment when Downing and Tipton exerted maximum effort. The riffs in Painkiller had the intensity of a tempest. The solos were unyielding, and the ferocity was unparalleled. No evidence of hard rock influences or any other genre was present. This was unadulterated heavy metal at its most powerful. However, as Judas Priest attained their zenith, disarray commenced. In 1992, Rob Halford departed from the band, creating an irreplaceable vacuum. Although the remaining members endeavored to continue with Tim "Ripper" Owens, Judas Priest was irrevocably changed. Downing continued to perform and write, however he was acutely aware that something was lacking. The collaboration among Halford, Downing, and Tipton was the fundamental essence of Judas Priest, and with one piece absent, the equilibrium was disrupted. In 2003, Halford rejoined, instilling optimism that Judas Priest may restore their past prominence. However, by that time, a transformation had occurred in KK. Downing. Prolonged internal discord, managerial pressure, and his deteriorating relationship with Glenn Tipton rendered him feeling estranged from the band. Despite Judas Priest's ongoing album releases and successful tours, Downing began to contemplate a hitherto unconsidered notion departing from the band. In 2011, while the band was preparing for the Epitaph Tour, Downing made a choice that reverberated across the metal community. He departed from Judas Priest following over 40 years. No farewell concert or final performance was held to express gratitude to the audience, just a letter was. issued confirming his absence from the tour. For many, it was a startling exit, but for Downing, it was unavoidable. The prolonged conflicts left him feeling increasingly undervalued inside the band he had contributed to establishing. Initially, Judas Priest said he departed for personal reasons. Nevertheless, the reality was considerably more intricate. Downing subsequently disclosed that his exit was due to enduring disputes with Glenn Tipton, issues with management, and a profound sense of marginalization within the band to which he had devoted his life. In contrast to prior lineup alterations, Judas Priest exerted no effort to persuade him to remain. They promptly substituted him with Richie Falk, a somewhat younger guitarist who exhibited no inclination to extend an invitation to Downing, not even as a guest. This decision incited indignation among longtime fans, who doubted if Judas Priest could maintain its essence after so readily substituting one of its foundational members. From a destitute youth in West Bromwich, a vagrant, to a heavy metal icon, KK, Downing has experienced everything. Was this genuinely the conclusion of his narrative, or was there yet another chapter poised to be composed private life? KK on stage. Downing was an exuberant and passionate guitarist, captivating audiences of tens of thousands with his formidable riffs and dynamic stage presence. However, upon distancing himself from the spotlight, he transformed into a markedly different individual, reserved, taciturn, and somewhat reclusive. During his prime years with Judas Priest, Downing did not engage in the unrestrained revelry characteristic of many of his peers. Although he occasionally yielded to the hedonistic rock and roll lifestyle characterized by booze and revelry, it was never a sustainable mode of existence for him. Downing remained unmarried and childless. His personal life was mostly unreported in the media. Absence of prominent relationships and controversies, unlike numerous other rock performers. For him, music appeared to be the sole lasting affection of his existence. KK departed from Judas Priest in 2011. Downing imagined he could finally relish a tranquil existence after over 4 decades with the band. He had made substantial investments in Astbury Hall Golf Course, an ambitious initiative designed to convert his private estate into a luxury golf resort and tourist attraction. It was not merely a financial investment, but his secondary aspiration beyond music, a legacy he intended to establish beyond Judas Priest. Nonetheless, reality diverged from his anticipations. The project incurred significant financial losses, resulting in a crisis. Having no alternative, he was compelled to sell Astbury Hall, a property to which he had dedicated years of effort and passion. Compounding the situation, he was compelled to sell his royalties rights to Judas Priest's songs, a harrowing decision, as it represented not only his primary source of money but also the artistic endeavors to which he had devoted his life. A heavy metal icon, Downing abruptly confronted a stark reality. Absence of a band, absence of a career, absence of assets. Notwithstanding all circumstances, he continued to cling to hope for a resurgence. Upon Glenn Tipton's diagnosis of Parkinson's illness, Downing perceived it as an opportunity to reconcile with Judas Priest. Due to Tipton's health impairing his performance, Downing anticipated being brought back to address the gap. However, Judas Priest entirely closed the door on him. Rather of reinstating him, they opted to proceed with the tour in his absence, appointing Andy Sneap as a provisional substitute for Tipton. This constituted a devastating setback for Downing. Not solely because to his denial of re-entry, but because it validated that the band he had contributed to had entirely forsaken him. He subsequently acknowledged that this was the moment he realized the opportunity with Judas Priest was irrevocably lost. However, Downing declined to permit his career to conclude in this manner. In 2019, following almost 10 years of silence, he declared his resurgence with a new endeavor, KK's Priest. A band he established with Tim "Ripper" Owens, the former frontman of Judas Priest who succeeded Halford during his hiatus. KK's Priest was distinct from Judas Priest. Nonetheless, for Downing, it represented the sole avenue to perpetuate his legacy. His resurgence incited discord within the metal scene. Certain ardent Judas Priest enthusiasts regarded KK's Priest as an inferior imitation, contending that in the absence of Halford or Tipton, it constituted only a nostalgia act. However, his fans perceived it in an alternative manner. They regarded it as a legitimate endeavor to maintain the essence of Judas Priest, the band he had contributed to founding but from which he was subsequently ousted. Irrespective of triumph or defeat, KK's Priest demonstrated one certainty. KK Downing has never genuinely departed from heavy metal. Despite all he had endured, he continued to grasp his guitar, remained on stage, and persevered in advocating for the music that had shaped his entire existence. Although Judas Priest progressed in his absence, KK Downing forged his own trajectory, a new chapter in his narrative, authored by his own agency. Current existence and heritage. Following over 50 years devoted to heavy metal, KK Downing remains unprepared to relinquish his instrument. Now in his 70s, although no longer affiliated with Judas Priest, he persists in making music, embodying the indomitable spirit of a tenacious guitarist. He no longer pursues notoriety or affirmation from those who have abandoned him. Rather, he performs out of passion, driven by the metal coursing through his veins, an element he has never been able to forsake. At present, Downing continues to engage with KK's Priest, the ensemble he established to preserve the essence of traditional heavy metal. Although this project may not attain the same impact as Judas Priest, for Downing, it signifies liberation and complete artistic autonomy over his music. He released Sermons of the Sinner in 2021, an album profoundly influenced by the golden era of Judas Priest, unequivocally demonstrating his enduring capacity for songwriting and performance. KK's Priest persists in touring, and although he no longer performs on the illustrious platforms of his Judas Priest era, Downing continues to exert maximum effort, as he has consistently done. Nevertheless, he currently leads a tranquil existence. Following the loss of Asbury Hall Golf Course, Downing is devoid of any business distractions from his musical pursuits. He maintains a modest lifestyle, dedicating his time to composition, engaging with his devoted followers, and sporadically attending rock concerts. Nonetheless, one incontrovertible truth persists. Since his departure, Judas Priest has not recognized him as a notable member of the band. The ongoing estrangement between him and his former bandmates persists, disheartening many admirers regarding a connection that ought to have been commemorated rather than obliterated. Notwithstanding all circumstances, KK Downing's legacy is indisputable. He was not merely a member of Judas Priest, he was one of its architects. The distinctive dual guitar approach he developed with Glenn Tipton characterized the band's sound and established a paradigm for heavy metal. Without him, Judas Priest may not have attained its significant success, and the genre itself might not have developed into the formidable and incisive force it is today. His impact transcends Judas Priest, molding a whole generation of guitarists. Dave Mustaine, Megadeth, James Hetfield, Metallica, Zakk Wylde, Ozzy Osbourne, and Adrian Smith and Dave Murray, Iron Maiden, have all derived inspiration from the playing style created by Downing and Tipton. Their aggressive guitar interaction established the groundwork for contemporary heavy metal, especially thrash metal, which bands such as Metallica, Slayer, and Megadeth would subsequently elevate to new heights. In addition to technique, Downing's stage persona contributed significantly to the archetype of a genuine heavy metal guitarist. The flying V guitar in his grasp, long hair cascading beneath stage illumination, and his distinctive headbanging posture during intense solos. These features constituted the visual quintessence of a metal guitarist. The contemporary model of a heavy metal guitarist was, in part, influenced by KK. Declining. Nonetheless, a regrettable facet of his legacy is the absence of acknowledgement in Judas Priest's official history. In 2022, the band was admitted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, KK. Downing received an invitation but was not afforded any special acknowledgement. This incited much anger among fans, as they contended that Judas Priest would not have existed in its current form without him. Despite a brief joint performance with his old colleagues, the separation between him and the band was evident. KK Downing, although no longer affiliated with Judas Priest, continues to be a legendary figure in heavy metal. His contributions are indelible, and although Judas Priest progresses without him, he has established a distinct legacy that endures via KK's Priest and the impact he has imparted on successive generations of artists. He may lack a prominent solo career like to Ozzy Osbourne, nor does his name pervade discussions like the guitarists of Metallica or Iron Maiden. However, for those who genuinely value heavy metal, KK Downing is an indispensable figure in music history. What is your opinion on KK Downing's tumultuous odyssey? Do you consider Judas Priest to remain authentically Judas Priest in his absence, or was his departure an unavoidable aspect of evolution? Do you endorse his return to Judas Priest, or do you believe his proper position will perpetually reside within Judas Priest? Convey your opinions in the comments section below. Remember to like and subscribe to remain informed about other inspiring narratives concerning the legends of rock and metal.